record, you were talking about, the recruiting system now, and you've talked about writing a book, and you said you never would, but maybe the book does need to be written, or maybe the book is found in this podcast. But talk about what inspired you to at least just have that thought, and what your experience has been as a dad putting a player through the recruiting process, I should say.
Yeah. No, I've learned so much. My youngest she's a junior in high school, and so has played on an ECNL team the last 3 years. And so as a men's coach for the last 27 years, that's the recruiting process I know. And I've watched it evolve and change. And, we can educate our boys in our club that we started a few years ago on that. But until I went through this with my daughter on the girls' side to really recognize, I think, how different it is. It is an unbelievably different process than what I walk through with the men. The timing of it, the pressure of it. I think all kids nowadays in our culture have social pressure, but the social pressure for the girls in the recruiting side, specifically to that ECNL platform where everything's based on how many coaches are sitting around the field and what type of notoriety there is. And, did you get this email? And, how many, camp invites did you get? And blah, blah. And then this selection game, did you get selected to the selection game? And what's that mean? And
right.
None of it's wrong, but it leads, when you combine it with social pressure these kids are at, and then you take essentially a 15-year-old girl is put into that, because that's essentially when their recruiting process starts, is 15-ish. They're not equipped for that. And then I think probably worse than that statement is, as parents, we're not equipped. Because at the end of the day, we're walking our kids through this process. And if we're not equipped, we're walking through this jungle together, not knowing what the next step is. And I've said this so many times with my daughter. I'm so thankful I do what I do for a living. I was able to actually walk her through this process with a lot of information that I have because of what I do for a living. I can't imagine doing this as a parent that just, has his own insurance business and maybe grew up playing soccer, maybe didn't. And now I'm exposed to this with my 15, 16-year-old, and I'm supposed to know what I'm doing. No chance, man.
Yeah.
You said something. You said something critical there. Mentioning the girls' side. The social stigma there, the social interaction there between the girls is unbelievable. I can't tell you how many of the girls, even the girls here at CNU that I talk to frequently, I ask them about the recruiting process all the time, and it's the same thing as what I've heard in the past. And I had a buddy. I still actually work his camps, and he had an awesome high school girls team club. They're a club team, but they're all high school girls. And I guess they'd won the club national title. And he said some obscure number, like 15, 16 of those girls went Division I. And he said as soon as one committed, like 9 more committed within a week or two, because they all freaked out, took the best offer they had at that time, even though it wasn't necessarily their timeline, but because one of the girls went, they all thought that their timeline had to go at that exact moment. And then he said 9 of them transferred or quit the team by the end of their freshman year.
Yeah.
And oh my God. And so, I've coached girls. One of the things I was super bothered by, a really good girls player. She was a freshman in high school. And we knew she was going to go big time. She's a good player. And I was getting a phone call from a big time Power 5 school, and she was a freshman in high school. And they can't talk to the girl, of course. So they called me, and I'm just like, oh my God, you're really recruiting this 14-year-old who may not play for you until she's 19. And, you're banking on 5 years from now. And I get the point of it. Don't get me wrong. You could sit on it and then lose her, so I get why, but it's a terrible system. I've got a daughter that's 4, and I just can't imagine her being recruited that early. She just kicked a soccer ball for the first time the other day. I'm like thinking about that already. It's such a broken system. I agree with you 100%. And I'm not looking forward to being in your shoes if my kids are good enough to be recruited. That's not a fun day.
Yeah, I think a key thing you said there too, which is incredible if you think about it. We live in a society and an age where information is readily available at the fingertips, and we figured out a way to essentially metric everything, right? We
Mm.
measure everything to the most ridiculous things. I mean, in our coaching, the GPS pods and the stuff that I'm doing with data analytics now. 10 years ago, I'm not even sure I understood what that word meant, and now I
Right.
can't imagine coaching without it. Why aren't we doing what you just said, which is tracking the number of kids committing at what age and where with what information, and then where did they end up 4 years from now? Does that make sense? Like, I think the data would actually point us to, I haven't met anybody that's like, oh no, the system's awesome, man. This is great. Everybody I talk to, from parents to even kids, if they're honest and want to spend more than 45 seconds talking about this at their age,
Right.
coaches, administrators, directors, I haven't had one person go, oh, no, I don't feel that way. Not at all. Are you kidding me? I mean,
Right.
the coaches that are involved in these mechanisms at the highest level on the girl side, multiples of them are good friends of mine. They've privately, off the record, just gone, dude, this sucks. This is
Hmm.
terrible. We don't even want to do it.
Right.
But this is, we're in a vicious circle. We have to do it to keep up with the Joneses, as the saying goes. Why aren't we having data that points back to it? And then we all go, yep, knew it.
Right.
System's broke.
Well, it's interesting because you could say that about a lot of systems, and but almost every single one of those systems, you say, well, yeah, but the people at the top are getting rich, or the people at the top are benefiting. I don't see anybody really benefiting from this.
1,000%.
Like, we're the coaches that are getting the players, right? We hate the system too, and
Yeah.
yeah, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the guy said, club sports are ruining families in this country. And I'm like, oh, I'm listening to this. It's, I was a club coach. I love club sports and kids loved it. But yeah, I think that if you're not I mean, look at all the parents that lose their minds over the recruiting process. I mean, we had a kid who was an academy kid back when pre CNL, pre MLS Next, pre the academies, when academy was just academy. And
Yeah.
this mom made a statement. She goes, "You're not playing Division III soccer. I've been spending this much money on academy soccer this whole time. You're going Division I." Like, that parent was making decisions for this 13 to 17-year-old based off of what might happen when they're 18. It's just like, oh man, is that the journey that we want? Is that what we want for our children? And I get it. You
Right.
want to give them every opportunity to get to their goals, but I think the overwhelming story is when you ask people, well, what did you think? Would you do it all over again, knowing that 90 something percent of these kids aren't going to go play college soccer, yet they played club? Would you do it all over again? And I bet you there's a lot of parents that say, at the very least, they're probably saying, yeah, but I'm not going to as many tournaments, or I'm not traveling as far, or, I would pay less attention to it, or invest less into it. And I think that a lot of people would say that. And
Yeah.
it's a sad reality. It was a good podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. I'll have to see if I can find it.
Yeah, I'll have to find it too. It was a good one. It really caught me.
Yeah.
Scott, do you feel like club soccer let you down, Scott?
Just the coaching. Just the coaching.
Yeah. Despite my attempts, Augie's still ended up. So
I mean, yeah. I mean, you as a parent and not a coach, we've kind of lost our minds as trying to pursue the best for your kids, and you kind of lose sight of the fact that it's probably going to work out the way it's supposed to in a lot of ways.
sure.
I don't know. It's if your kid's just doing the right thing, and I don't know. That's why we started this podcast in the first place. So
Yeah.
Kevin, I want to kind of go back to what we were first talking about, which was, just kind of the mechanics of NAIA, and, I don't think there's no NAIA in Virginia. I don't know where.
Scott, I'm going to learn a ton today, because my understanding of NAIA is how to spell NAIA. That's about it.
Right.
I'm looking forward to hearing everything Kevin has to say, because I get questions all the time. Like, oh, what's the difference between you and Division I? Which that's all people really care about here, because there's no real Division II presence or NAIA presence. And I don't really have buddies in either one of those two worlds, so I don't know much about it. It's an ignorance thing on my part. So I'm looking forward to, I got the same questions for you, Kevin. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So we started off earlier before you came on, Cheese, and we were just talking about like the spring and, the differences in what you guys are able to do and, everyone else, and just kind of how your year plays out in
Yeah.
your league. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think my career's been good from the sense that I've gotten a little bit of a viewpoint of a few different things. And so what we always say with the NAIA is the rhythm of the season and probably even resource wise. And it can vary. Obviously, you guys all understand it varies school to school. Is the NAIA is very, very similar to D2 as far as kind of the overall rhythm structure. So like in the spring, when they come back in January, we immediately get into the gym and start working on, speed and agility and some strength work. And then just with our weather in Kansas City, most of our playing is kind of just, we go indoors and we free play. I think free play is still a massive part of the game. I think it's a part of the game that we've actually lost. And I think at the end of the day, why do I love this sport? Well, I just remember as a kid just going out and grabbing some buddies, and I grew up overseas, so it was very, very different. But just playing the game, and so we free play at MNU through about the middle of February, and then we'll go out and we'll do kind of a proper periodization spring. So we'll go Monday through Thursday, and then typically play a friendly on Saturday. And that lasts about 7 weeks because our guys were completely done with school by May 3rd this year, I think. So, that rhythm works with not only the weather, but I think also just the wear and tear. Like the games continued to change, and this as at the collegiate level, it wasn't that many years ago where our kids didn't have to work. Now they got to work. You know what I mean? And so, and we do so much more with them now, like my college career was so different than these guys is now as far as time commitment. So I think there is something to be said for, a rhythm that allows them to still have some life to it. I was a D3 coach for 4 years, and that's part of what I love about D3 is just that I think that balance of life and soccer and academics is just, it's a little bit more naturally there because the kids aren't tied to a dollar figure. I enjoy recruiting with money a lot more than I did at D3, but there's a part of D3 recruiting that I love too, because it was just, you didn't have money involved. And so yeah, kind of the spring rhythm is similar. I think NAI is allowed 3 spring dates, D2 is allowed 5 spring dates, and D1's allowed 7 spring dates. So we'll use all 3, and typically, if we have a match left over from the fall, we'll use that as well. So we get plenty. Just again with our rhythm. If I was an NAI school in Florida where it's beautiful, I'm probably going to be beating down the doors to try to get 3 to 5 for spring dates. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. We get 1. It's a huge difference for us, and we put all of our eggs in one basket. And so, no, that's nice. I mean, that's one of the big differences when people ask, what's the difference between the levels? Your freedom is one of the huge differences. I just looked at your schedule, Kevin. Your national tournament was a week long.
Yeah.
I mean, what a nightmare. I saw all 4 of your games were played in 7 days.
Yeah. And that's an improvement. When we lost in the final in 2015, we were still in the old system, and it was even more compact. So we've spread it out just a bit. And it's a haul. I mean, it's a haul. It's hard, but there's something unique to the NAI national tournament. So I was blessed at the D3 level to go to the national tournament twice. And obviously around here, we've actually hosted the D2 nationals a couple years ago in Kansas City, the Final Four, I would say. The one thing with the NAI, the national tournament, that final 16, all 16 of the best teams left go to one location. And it's a slog, but it's a cool environment.
Yeah.
You have they do an opening banquet, 16 teams from across the country are there. And they do a really nice opening kind of ceremony. It's usually a dinner, and kind of just a place to hang out, and then you play. And so, when you're in the off day, you've got a training session in the morning, then you're jumping into the stands and watching some soccer, and then you go for lunch and try to get the guys to the hotel. But it's a cool environment. It's very, very unique.
No, that's awesome that you do that. I mean, that's that you don't see that maybe at the Final Four. You'll get that in our level.
Yeah.
No, you're correct. That's 100% fantastic. Talk about an experience there, but just sticking to the whole, wow, you're playing barely any rest, go back out there and go play again. And against nationally ranked tough opponents that's going to be a tough chore for these kids. And, we're all talking about health and, giving these kids the necessary breaks and stuff like that. And it's like, you don't even want to train in between those days. Like, look, get off your chance. Just stay in an ice bath until Tuesday. I'll see you guys.
No, it's funny you talk about it, the way the game's changed. We actually found a cryo chamber in Wichita.
Yeah.
So it's a franchise called iCryo. And so they have a cryo chamber. And I called them and just said, hey, here's what we're doing. Here's what we need. And I'd researched some of the scientific effects of it.
Right.
And was like, you know what? Even if the science isn't right, if half of my guys, the placebo effect, if they think they're recovered better, I'm in. So we actually cryoed. We found it after our first game. So we cryoed in between on days. So you're right. And that we wear GPS pods. So like I said, we metric everything. Man, I didn't even turn those. I didn't analyze any of the data that week because I was scared to death of what I was going to see. We just turned these guys into Iron Men. And 2015, we lost in the final. I did learn a lot, though. We lost in the final in 2015, and we lost because of injuries. I wasn't deep enough. So that's the other thing with the NAIA structure of the national tournament. And you're right. Philosophically, we can go into health, and we've done that as coaches. I mean, like I said, we've extended it by 2 days, which was a major win for us.
Wow. It used to be 4 games.
The metrics of this, it's just, it is what it is, right? When you send everybody to one side at 16, you get it done in 8 days or 7 days or whatever it is, you're not spending nearly as much. But the difference so when I was a D3 coach and we qualified for nationals, one of the cool things about the NCAA and one of the draws to the NCAA for schools that are leaving the NAIA is if your team makes nationals, it's not on your dime.
Right.
In the NAIA, it's on your dime.
Yeah, that's huge.
So imagine when men's soccer, women's soccer, and our football team in the fall make nationals.
Oh yeah.
Like try writing that check.
No, I can't even fathom.
Exactly. So a lot of this goes back to, and especially nowadays, right? Schools are struggling to figure out how to stay alive. Well, you're not staying alive by spreading your national tournament out to 3 weeks if you're paying the dime.
Yeah, especially if you have to fly. I'm assuming you just busted, probably wasn't that bad, but
no. Yeah.
I mean, we have something similar for our conference tournament. We were in California this year for our conference tournament, so across the entire country. And yeah, the 3 teams on the East Coast that went, they were 50, 60 grand, 70 grand for the 5 days. And okay, do that over 7. And you're creeping up to $100,000, if you're feeding the guys properly, or are you going cheap and going peanut butter and jelly sandwiches the whole time? You're there to save some money, I guess, but that's an expensive trip. One way or another, it's an expensive week.
Yeah.
3 teams in 1 week. No, thank you.
Yeah, no, it's nuts, man. There's so many unique things to it, but it is something in 2015 that I learned. And so actually my recruiting changed. And I'll tell you that we won it this year because we were able to use more guys, and not just in those 7 days, but throughout this season. And that was one of the things that I need to improve upon and continue to work on. I did a decent job with the help of my assistants this year, is getting guys into games in moments so that we could learn to trust them, and that they would learn that we were trusting them, so that at the national tournament, you're not throwing a kid in who hasn't been in the game in a month.
Yeah.
Right. Because you throw that kid into a high intense environment in nationals and you haven't used him in the last month, that you're doing that kid a disservice, man. You're asking him to fail. And so, again, everything's system based, right? I know that in order to win a national championship, I'm going to have to win 4 games in 7 days. So that thought process starts back in August in preseason and then previous in how we recruit.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I'm meeting with my guys right now. We're doing our exit meetings, and right before I hopped on, I had two boys in here, and both of them started. I would say they're starters, but I asked them, "What do you think's better?" Because we sub a lot. I'll play a lot of guys, and I kind of wrote up our lineup. It's sitting right here, and I was like, "Oh man, you could argue we got two starters in a lot of spots." And I asked them, like, "What's better? Is it better to have lots of rotation and give those guys the time and let them play? Or is it better to have those 11, play them a lot for continuity reasons and just to get the best 11 on the field and then sub a little bit from here and there?" And, it sounds like in your experience for your championship run here, you did maybe even sacrifice or win it two earlier in the year by playing some guys more minutes than you might have, if you just put your regulars out there. But that won you at the end of the season because those guys got valuable experience in that run. I mean, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, no, spot on. It's hard to say because our game is so fluid. Did I actually tie or lose a game that I could have won based on substitutions? I don't.
Sure.
Honestly, I'm probably not smart enough to answer that. I would say. I just know. I know that in those moments when I was sitting there like, man, I'm not sure I want to sub this guy in, my mind, I've learned to allow my mind to go, okay, listen, long season, number one conference in the country. So some dogfights coming up and we want to win it. I think I got a group that could potentially win it. We were definitely not the most talented group this year. I've said this 100 times since we won it. What won it was our culture. We had such a strong culture and a really good group of men and incredible leadership. But again, go back to that point, like you said, I'm looking at it going, you know what? Let's get this guy some minutes. Let's give him a chance to succeed or let him learn from failure because it's a long season, but it also goes by really quick.
I like that you just brought that up. One of my questions was, besides talent, what do you think it was? I like that you said culture. That's something we talk about all the time. And I get the question in the recruiting process all the time. I'm sure you get it as well. It's, how is your culture, or what's your culture like? And I kind of giggle. I've said it on this podcast 100 times. It's like, what coach is going to say we have a terrible culture? We need you to come in and fix it for us. It's just not going to happen. Everybody's culture is perfectly fine. That's not true, of course. And culture is a daily battle. It's a daily battle. I've been on the bus with a 6-hour bus ride ahead of me after a super disappointing loss where I've got my hands are in choking position, but they're not around one of my guys' necks. It's just sitting there waiting. I'm ready to lose my mind. That's when it's tested the most, right? And so you mentioned something, though. You just said you had really good leadership. How much of that leadership was organic? It's just I just had two dudes that were just amazing leaders. They came in this way versus how much of it was, oh yeah, well, we do these 2 or 3 things and it really helps us. I mean, what do you got there? What are some of the things that you guys do with your program?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. This is going to be a long answer. I'm going to warn you right now.
It's okay.
So obviously I've been coaching a while and I've always understood the importance of culture and I'm thankful for that. I'm not sure if I got that as an assistant, as a player, just maybe the way I was raised, family environment, whatever. But I've always understood that culture was important. But I used to say that I used to operate my teams, like you just said, to where I allowed my leadership to be an organic factor. But I'm a control freak. So after years of having teams where that organically didn't happen, I began to basically push against that and say, you know what? Why do we use the phrase, some guys are born leaders, right? And I really started fighting against that and challenging it and doing some research and some reading and some things on my own. And I decided to try something through talking to various coaches and getting ideas. And so I started a leadership group. And so the way it started was a buddy of mine was doing it down at Hardin Simmons on the women's side, Marcus Wood. And unbelievable coach, one of the best coaches in the country. He's, done incredibly well. His winning percentage is some dumb number you don't even believe when you read it. And he gave me the idea. So guys would vote 3 to 5 guys into a leadership group, and I started doing leadership training with them. We would walk through some really, really good books, how to win friends and influence people, the 21 indispensable qualities of a great leader, blah, 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 blah. And then we would apply that into a team factor. So I started with 4 or 5 guys doing that for a couple of years. And I noticed that now this organic leadership I was actually had more control of it, because I was almost guaranteeing some level of leadership that maybe hadn't existed or really frustrated me 2 years prior, because I didn't have an organic leader or an organic group of leaders that really took it on. So I did that for a couple of years. And then I went, you know what? Why am I only doing this with 4 or 5 guys? So a few years ago, we started doing leadership training with the entire team. And so I have an entire curriculum, and it's a huge part of our preseason. And we literally walk through leadership with the entire team. So this year with our reserve team, we had about 44 guys. 44 guys are sitting in an auditorium room, first meeting, 1st of August, and we're talking about leadership. And we're setting out the 3 pillars of leadership, and we're walking through categorically what it looks like to be a leader. I'm telling you, that has changed the culture of my team, because now, is the organic part still there? Yes, but not in the way that I have leadership or I do not have it. I have leadership. The organic part is how strong is that leadership, or how effective is that leadership? And this year, the group of men that we had, it was a culmination of a few things. A lot of these guys battled through COVID. And so there was some resiliency there. And then a lot of them, in this current culture of the transfer portal and all this bullcrap going on, these guys committed to MNU. So they didn't just come through COVID, but they committed to us. So we had guys that have been just given everything for the badge for 4/5 years. They'd been through this leadership training. The super senior who spent all 5 years here, I started it his sophomore year. So this is his 4th time going through it. I think the product of that, along with, of course, there is some still organic pieces to individual qualities, personalities. That's what did it for us. Is I've turned leadership into almost, I don't want to say this because it sounds arrogant. I've turned leadership into almost an automatic or guaranteed factor in our culture. But what I would say is you still have levels of that. Does that make sense?
100%. We talk about similar things. I'm not at the detail. I'm probably going to have a separate phone call with you later so I can steal that curriculum. But, I'm glad you're talking about tiers, because whenever we name captains, we do the vote or whatever. And I always say, all right, cool, they're captains. The guys that I'm mostly focused on now, though, are the guys right underneath that. I'm like, you guys are going to influence the entire thing here, because if you're not listening to them, or if you're disrespecting them, the guys underneath you are going to buy into that. And it's like, oh, we don't have to pay attention to coach. We don't have to pay attention to the captains or whatever. It's just the trickle down's going to just bury you. And then this year, we even talked to the freshmen. We just said, well, how are you handling leadership? And they're like, well, we're freshmen. It's like, okay, like you have a role to play. As an individual, you're playing. All right, well, are you doing your absolute best? Are you giving you everything you got? Are you fit? Are you rocking and rolling? And when I ask you a question, are you yes, sir, and doing the best you can? And what if I bring a recruit on campus? Are you not a leader to that kid? Obviously there's a level there, even though you might be low man on the totem pole. You're only 17. Some of these kids might be. And so I get where there might be different levels of thought, but yeah, I agree with you 100% that everybody, while different, has a role when it comes to leadership. You're 100% on target there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny you say that, because the one of the examples we give in our leadership talk, and it happened this year when we won it, is I think some of the most powerful people on your entire team are the guys that never enter the pitch. They sit on your bench. But when your bench, when you've got a guy, and I don't want that guy to be satisfied sitting on the bench, because otherwise that guy doesn't belong on our team. He needs to be disappointed. He needs to be frustrated. He needs to be, beside himself that he can't find a way to get on the pitch. But in the moment that the game starts, he has the decision to make of his value and importance and his role to the team. And if he stays selfish, He'll never give anything. But when he doesn't, man, I can't tell. I mean, our bench was absolutely unreal this year. And in the national tournament, like you talked about, 4 games in 7 days, you don't think we needed the bench in game 3 when we went into overtime? We went into overtime in game 3. Like, you don't have anything left. Our benches, at the end of games, the guys can't even talk. They're exhausted and they haven't played a second.
Yeah.
That's leadership, man. I have so much respect for those young men that take on that. But also, I love the stories of those guys who the next year end up on the pitch, right? Because they just kept grinding, they kept going, and they continued. They didn't give up on their own dreams and their own desires and wishes, and we continued to push them. But in that moment, they were selfless and they gave everything for the team.
Yeah, I just it's funny you say that. We had one of the best captains we ever had was a backup, and you know, he was the backup to a guy that was an All-American, and he was like, how am I supposed to beat this kid? This kid's amazing. And I went to a wedding just a few weeks ago, and he was given the best man speech, and there was probably, 12 of our alums there. It was an awesome night, and he was the center of attention a bunch of the times, and it was cool to see that he can have such an impact lifelong too. I mean, you're talking a best man at one of the other alums' weddings, and he was still having a major impact in those guys' lives, and he wasn't on the field for most of the game, if any. And there was a lot of games he got very, very little because we kept the other kid on the whole time. Yeah, so you're 100% correct. I mean, he got that through peer voting. It wasn't like, hey, let's just promote this kid. No, the kid earned it from his guys as the backup. I mean, talk about a powerful piece to the puzzle, sitting a few seats down from you on the bench during the game. I mean, you're 100% correct.
Yeah, it's good.
Jeez.
Yeah, I wanted to jump if you're cool with jumping, Scott. You know, I will tell you this, going back to this, talking about recruiting. If you do write that book, I want to be on it with you, but we need to both probably not be coaching anymore because we're going to. So, you know, we'll give a career-ending memoir or something together. So,
yeah, I will not. If I write that sucker, I will not be popular with the people in youth soccer who are making a lot of money. I can tell you that.
Yeah, no, that's tying it into that podcast. I definitely see that part. But well, look, you had mentioned earlier that you know, your daughter on the recruiting side. I want to jump more into that. Not just talking about the differences between boys and girls recruiting, but just you're a parent now. You're sitting on that side. What did you learn as a parent? Because most people that are listening to this aren't coaches that are like, oh yeah, you're validating everything I'm saying. You know, what did you learn as a parent sitting there watching your daughter go through the process? Like, give advice to other parents coming from a parent, not coming from a national championship coach here.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think maybe the first thing that jumps out to my mind is going to be fairly specific to me, but I still think it's a really important thing for each of us, because one of the things with parenting is typically there's no handbook, right? We were each parented a certain way, and, you know, thank God we ended up okay, and, you know, probably went through periods of our life where, you know, they wondered if we were going to be okay. And then all of a sudden you're a parent and you're just kind of just doing this thing. And, you know, you obviously gain information and you try to do your best. But when you jump into the recruiting process, I think one of the most important things for me was hitting a realization. It probably took a bit too long because I do this for a living. I went into it thinking I knew everything. And so at the point where I went, you know what, I need to stop. I need to raise my hand and go, I actually don't know what I'm doing right now. And I need to approach this like anything else in life. And I need to get really good, valuable information from people that I trust to help my daughter through this process. So I think maybe the first thing is don't think that you know it, right? And so, because when you go into something like recruiting, at the end of the day, when you say, what's the why? I think the why in our lives is really, really important. I think in every aspect of our life, if we find out anything that we've done that's purposefully driven and we've done well, we can go back and find a really solid why. If you don't have a why, you typically will accomplish something and then go, it didn't really mean anything, right? There's just an emptiness to it because you didn't really establish the why. start in the recruiting process. What's the why? And sometimes that's really hard for a parent because you were an athlete or you weren't an athlete. So you either had an experience as an athlete that you loved and you desperately want your child to have that, or your athletic career was derailed because God didn't give you enough genetics, or you were much, much better at the violin, or something along those lines.
Kevin, it's the coach's fault.
Exactly. So now you've entered into your child's experience desperately wanting something you didn't have. And each of those as a foundational piece have nothing to do with your child and everything to do with you. Doesn't mean you're a bad person, but until it becomes your child's experience, then it's just your experience. And that's why we have 7 out of 10 kids quit in youth sports by the age of 13 in our country, is because it's not theirs. Hand them the keys, right? In our club, I do this big parent lecture series on, and it's influenced by a lot of really good people around the country doing really good work, like John O'Sullivan, and people dealing with club soccer. So when you enter the recruiting process, I think it's important. What's the why, right? Do you want your kid to be? Do you want to go to work and tell your cronies that your daughter signed D1? Right. It's not a real good why, because D1 might not be the right process. What is D1, D2, D3, NAIA, JUCO? In our country, there's no promotion relegation.
Right.
Stop talking about D1, D2, D3, NAIA. Start talking about location, size, academic offered, social environment around the school, finances today. You going to strap your kid with $100,000 in debt as they walk into life? Start looking at the why with real tangible things that make sense for your child, and really find out, is the why selfish? Because if it's selfish, you've started the recruiting process in a really bad spot, and the chance of it going well is not good. So establish the why first and foremost. And for me, that why, I desperately wanted my daughter to find the right school. My why was good, but my application of the why was, I know it all. I've been doing this. Yeah, I have on the men's side. Women, completely different. So for me, that was the starting point, is you don't know it, right? So now gain information, talk to people, start to listen, really. And then I think another thing is I did a great job, my wife and I, and my daughter, I'm so proud of her, is she took control of the recruiting process. And that's big. It's frustrating at times because our kids are, especially girls, man, she was 15, 16. She's a great student. She's organized. She's responsible and pretty blessed. But at the end of the day, she doesn't, it's like, hey, did you respond to that coach's text? I'll get to it. Oh, snap. It's been 2 days. Are you kidding me? What do you mean you'll get to it? Right? The little bubble on their iPhone that has like 86 on the text message thing that drives me absolutely nuts, because mine can't sit there with one for more than 20 seconds. I'm like, hey, those 86 are a stinking coach. So I think understand what you don't know, gain good information, surround yourself with good people, right? So your club, your directors, your potential friends. I think in your guys' case, right, you guys were friends, and Cheese, you had some experience, and Scott, you were able to say, you know what, man, I need you to help me walk through this. It's brilliant, man. There's vulnerability in that, but at the end of that also comes from a long-standing relationship where there's trust. And then, I'm sure, Cheese, you were more than happy to help Scott walk through that, right? And so, and then I would say the second big thing is give it to your kid. Make this their process, and then guide them, of course. Don't just take your hands completely off the wheel, especially with boys. Ooh, you take your hands completely off the wheel, that dude ain't going to college, right? Thank goodness for my dad. I remember that. I didn't want anything to do with it. I was a punk 19-year-old, thought I knew everything. My dad set up things and kind of forced me down this funnel. And thankfully, I ended up having an incredible 4-year career, lifelong memories, lifelong friends, and I'm blessed to do what I do today.
You brought some interesting points there. First of all, you're in the business and you're able to sit back and say, I don't know enough. I need to ask for help. That's amazing advice, because there's a lot of parents that aren't in the business, that didn't play college sports, that don't look for the assistance or think they can handle it all on their own.
Yeah.
They think
And
they know it all.
right, no, that's a massive. I've had those guys in my office, and I'm like, oh God, I can't recruit this kid anymore just because of his dad. I've had that happen, and usually those kids just sit there and they're just quiet. It's just like, like this isn't a good situation. So, no, I thought that's an amazing point right there. And as far as Scott's recruiting process go, I only helped him because I wanted Augie to come play for me. And despite all the negative things I said about William and Mary, he still chose to go to school there. So, yeah. No, you brought up some excellent points there. And no, I think that's wonderful advice. And I would love to see more parents go that route. You brought up the one at the end there, though, about you said mainly boys. I've had a lot of parents sit in my office and just say, it's Johnny's decision. We're just here. I'm just like, God, I get that to a point, but I also that kid needs the help. I mean, I look at my 5-year-old, he turns 6 in a couple of days. I'm like, there's no way this kid until 26 isn't going to need an extra kick in the butt. They need that assistance. Don't get me wrong. There's the other side of it where you're just the helicopter. You're just telling them everything, giving them all the answers, and they can't even talk to a coach because dad's here and they do all the talking for them. But I think it's also as damaging if you're one of those parents who's just like, just tell us who to write the check to. It's like, that's not great advice either. Continue to throw advice at them, some lived experiences. And all these kids are playing for clubs that had college players. Just go ask them what their process was. Yeah. Just go, what was your process like? And if you're just asking all the D1 guys that have full rides, then go find someone that had a disappointing college career. Ask them about their recruiting process. You're going to learn more about yours just from some Q&A with some people that lived the experience. So I think it's great what you've done about how you gave your daughter advice, but you also gave her some freedom, and then you checked on that freedom, and, kind of just a little give and take there. And I bet you she, respected that a ton more and wanted to hear from you more, that you weren't overwhelming, but you also weren't absent. You got to find that happy median. You got to kind of in and out, let them learn, but throw something out of it at the same time. And that's wonderful advice. And it bugs me to no end when a parent goes, I'm just here. It's like, I just drove, I'm buying food later. Yeah, we need more than that, Dad.
Yeah. I think a key there to that is one of the things that you can do as a parent is I use the word hand them the keys. When you sit down with your kid at the beginning of the recruiting process, and it's truly questions to them about what they want, right? Mm-hmm. So you sit down and you go, where do you want to go to school? How far away from home? How big the school? Do you really want to play? Do you want to play your freshman year? Do you want to play for a team that wins a lot? Do you want to go to a program that's going to staff? You ask them questions. When they answer those questions, it becomes their process, but that is also then the foundation for accountability. So they're not returning a text message. Hey, if you return those text messages, no, Dad, get off my back. What are you doing? No, not on your back, man. You told me you really wanted to play. Yeah. You still really want to play? Yeah. Okay. Just making sure the answer hasn't changed. Mm-hmm. That's it. The kid walks away. It was his answer. He said he really wanted to play. Right. So when Dad goes, hey, if you return the text messages, he doesn't have to go, well, what do you mean you ever return the text messages? You know what it's like to be a college coach? He's probably dropping you. Those things go unsaid because the kid tuned you out. And it appears like Dad cares more about the process than the son does. But when you come back to the foundation of the answer to the questions, there's your accountability, right? I did this a few times with my daughter. All right. Hey, listen, you said this was important. Is it still important? Yeah. Okay, cool. Just making sure the answer didn't change. Because if the answer changes, it's okay. It's okay, right? Going to love you anyway. Going to help you anyway. But just want to make sure this was still the thing. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then magically, 20 hours later, right? Hey, Dad, I did this. Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes handing them the keys also provides the foundation for the accountability towards that process. And you don't have to nag. But I love what you said. You absolutely cannot do this. It's called absent parenting.
Yeah.
Not sure I've ever seen anything in my time where that worked.
Well, you just use the analogy of handing them the keys. Can you imagine doing that when they're learning how to drive?
I wanted to by the time I worked through my third daughter driving. I'm going to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Like, your sisters were horrible here.
Yeah, that's right.
Figure it out.
Hey, I want to dig into something here. A coach, I'm not going to mention names or where they're from or anything like that, but he was asked a question. I've asked other coaches this. He was asked a question. You're in the NAIA side of things. You had mentioned the transfer portal earlier. In your world, I think there's a lot of international recruiting in the NAIA world, and it's all the divisions, mainly the Division I world, 2 world, NAIA, JUCO. I'm sure not as much in Division 3. There is some, but not a ton. But the coach said something to this club, and it's a local club, and the club was like, "Whoa, this is weird." And they reached out to a bunch of coaches to kind of confirm this, and they said, the guy goes, "Oh, when it comes to recruiting, domestic high school recruiting is now third. So whether I'm hitting the portal first or I'm going international first or the other way around, I will then supplement last with domestic high school recruiting." And I'm bringing that up mainly because the kids that are watching this or that will watch this, the parents that are watching this fit that criteria the most. We talk about club soccer. We talked about how, that podcast was like, it's ruining families. What do you say to that? Do you agree, disagree? I mean, what are your thoughts in general? What's it like in the NAIA side of things when it comes to recruiting, and just basic general thoughts when it comes to that statement?
Yeah. So let me just clarify. So one of the pools of players was transfer portal. One of the pools of players was internationals, and one of the pools was domestic high school, which also involves club.
Yeah. By high school, I mean high school age kids.
Yeah.
So
okay.
whether it's
domestic club / high school kid,
club, the private school, public school kid, however they got recruited, they're 16 to 18-year-old high school kids, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that guy was saying they were third, as in third in a line of value, or like.
Sure. And how quickly they can help a college program was kind of the point of emphasis that was brought up. And basically it was saying like the other two routes, those kids are more ready to help me day one than the other route.
Yeah.
So there is that extra caveat there. So I don't want to leave that out.
Yeah.
Which sounds like naturally that would be true. You're talking about older kids with college experience, or Europeans or African kids or South American kids or whatever. Obviously they're going to have a different upbringing, but that wasn't the case 10 years ago before the portal boomed.
Yeah.
And for a lot of schools 10 years ago, international was used as supplement outside of the few schools that did all international recruiting.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts to that in general? And
I think the 3 pools as they've defined them are probably good, right? I mean, I think that will encapsulate a majority of the recruits that, are available for any given calendar year. I think each one brings its own value. So I think I would have trouble saying one is above the other. I mean, arguably, could you say that essentially one, sorry guys, I think let me check this real quick. My battery saver just came on, and I might need to. I think that would suck if you lost me. So I'm gonna talk while I'm getting my charger up. I think there's value in each one of the pools. If you're just talking soccer, is it possible that the transfer portal with a guy who already has experience, or international where the pool of players is specifically for me as well is quite large, because, and this is a whole different topic if you want to get into NAI, and I promise we don't have time today. I call it the ESPN culture, right? So the American culture is what we call the ESPN culture. So the top level American kids would have trouble playing at my program,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm NAIA. So they're not even going to sniff us, right? Because it's not, they live in an ESPN culture, right?
Yeah.
So I'll use basketball analogy. We're 25 minutes from KU. So that's what they grow up with in this area. So,
Right.
you know, does KU basketball, is KU basketball much, much better than the local D2 and the local NAIA basketball? 1,000%. It's not men's soccer.
Right.
Men's soccer is its own world, man, with the number of players. And honestly, in our area, the Big 12, think about it. D1, KU, K-State, Texas, Texas Tech. No men's soccer. None. Right? I'm in a completely different place in the country. So could you say that those pools of players add value from a soccer standpoint and you could tier them? Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
But here's the deal. When I talked about culture 15 minutes ago being so important, I could almost reverse that. Transfer portal kid, is every transfer portal kid a problem? No. But are there red flags and warning signs on a lot of those? 100%. So if I'm adding to my culture, I've already got a guy that needed to get out of another place, and sometimes for a good reason. I've had incredible success with kids transferring. Don't get me wrong. But there are flags there, right?
Yeah.
International. I have a rule. I don't recruit more than 4 guys from one country at any given time. Why? Because I was an assistant coach at one point, and we had 6 guys from the same country. They formed their own team. Mm-hmm. We couldn't get our culture going, right? So I formed that rule for myself, and I had it all the way back at the D3 level, and never take more than 4 from any one country. Culturally, international kids bring something different. So I would struggle. I like the 3 pools. I would struggle with saying that any one gives me greater value, because I think I could take a topic. I could say, let's just talk football, soccer. Yeah, I could probably rank them. Now let's talk culture, right? Probably need to rank those. And now let's talk sustainability or growth development. And I've got a whole different one, right? So the high school club kid, right, who's coming out of a really good club/high school environment, you know, he's got 4 years of eligibility. He's gone through the process really well. He's going to be in our program for 4 years. I just got done telling you one of the biggest reasons why we were able to win a national championship is I figured out a way to keep guys at school. How simple does that sound? Well, guess what? How many 4-year guys we have anymore?
Right.
Does that make sense? So I like the pools. I think there's value in each pool. I think it would go back to a bigger topic, which is find the fit. Find the fit. Find the school that fits you. And find the things that are most important to you, and sit down and figure that out. What are your non-negotiables? What are the things you have to have this incredible experience? And let the people around you guide those through questions and answer them. You'll find a fit, right? And guess what? At the end of that fit, it might be D1. It might be D2. Might be a JUCO. Might be an NAIA D3. But it's the right fit. Yeah. Instead of on the front end going, I'm so tired of hearing this, Cheese. Hey, I watched you this weekend. I've known you for a while. You know, what are you looking for? Oh, coach, I want to play D1. All right. If all you want to do is play D1, that's easy. I can get you a D1 as the director of a club. I can get you a D1 tomorrow. But is that all you want? Because I'll get you to D1. You're going to win 3 games a year. I can get you D1.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. No, I love your answer. Obviously to put school niche involved, can you, I really can't even bring in international kids. I mean, it's unless they're willing to pay high out-of-state prices and stuff. So obviously there's a lot of moving parts than just the simplicity of the question, but I think that your answer is spot on. I mean, I think if you live in just one world, then you're going to hurt yourself in all those categories that you mentioned. You're going to hurt yourself in 1 or 2 of them easily. And I agree 100%. I think that, there's definitely something to having kids here all 4 years, having to work their way up from the bottom as a new guy, putting on the shirt for the first time at practice and building themselves all the way through all the adversity to finally playing and being the guy. There's something about that guy versus I just brought in this superstar transfer and he's going to play right away. There's a difference there. Now, obviously, there could be greatness in both regards, and something negative could happen to both. Every story is going to be a little different, of course, but that's a wonderful answer. I'm glad you said that. I think that that goes deeper into kind of what we were responding when the question was asked. I think it's awesome. I like what you just said, though. You mentioned going into the recruiting process. You mentioned the non-negotiables. I don't think people have any clue what those are. And it blows my mind because when you buy a house, when you buy a car, when you spend the type of money you're about to spend on school, obviously, if you're getting a full ride, we're talking a different category here, but let's pretend you're 95% of the country that has to spend full price on school. You have non-negotiables. You're not going to buy a house where the left wall is missing, like, oh, this is a great house. There's no kitchen, but there's a house, like, no, you have non-negotiables in all of these areas. But when it comes to recruiting, people have the biggest blinders on. They're just looking at one or two things, like you just mentioned. A lot of times it's as simple as division. And it's just like, man, you're going to spend this much money and you're going to get a fraction of the experience based off of what you're telling me. And that just blows my mind. So if you don't mind, you've lived it now as a dad, you've done it a ton as a coach. What do you think are just the biggest no-brainer? These need to be your non-negotiables that you discuss with your family.
Yeah. So here's exactly what I did with my daughter, and I probably won't get them all, but how far away from home do you want to go to school? Answer the question, right? How big of a school do you want? And a lot of times that one's like, I don't know. I don't know if I care, right? Other times it's like, you know what? I don't want a big school. Or, you know what? I really want a big school. But, how big is school? All right. What do you want to major in? Unbelievable. You're supposed to be going to college to get a major. And how many times I ask that? And they're like, or they're talking to me at MNU specifically. And so I'm not working with our Toka FC kids in the club, and say, hey, what do you want to major in? Chemical engineering. Did you do any research?
We don't have that.
We don't have chemical engineering. Are you sure you want to be a chemical engineer? Yeah. Okay. Well, you better go find a chemical engineering school.
Right.
So, what major? And then for me, this came from probably my experience as a coach. And this is what my daughter ended up focusing on, which ended up being really good for her in the process, is I said, do you want to win? And she goes, yeah, of course I want to win. I said, okay. I said, so what level of winning do you want? She goes, well, what do you mean? I said, do you want to go to a school that has 18 games and they win 10? So 10 out of 18. I mean, I want to win more than that. Oh, you do? Yeah. Okay. So what do you mean? Well, I want to win a national championship.
That's different.
Are you sure? Yeah, that'd be awesome. Okay. You see where I'm going with this? Is like, it started this big pool from these questions started to go down. And so for my daughter specifically, then the main non-negotiable became winning. She was blessed to get recruited. But a lot of the schools, this is exactly what she'd do. She'd come home. Hey, Dad, I got a text message or an email or whatever from blah, 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 blah. She wants, and again, everything's personalized. When we won the national championship this year, an image that I'll never forget ever. It's burned into my brain. And the first couple of times I told it, I actually got emotional. I won't today because it's been a few months. Is I got done. I shook the other coach's hand and my brain's exploding. And I turned towards the field and my 17-year-old daughter is sprinting at me. And she's already got tears in her eyes and she jumps on me. Like, that will never, ever go away out of my brain. But I also think that she had already established that she wanted to be a part of a program that wins. And when she watched us go through that, and she watched all of the years of me coaching and being gone and listening to all the crap I spew when I come home after a loss or the recruit I lost, and then and we lost in 2015 in overtime, and in 2012 we went to another Final Four. She was alive during this whole thing and watched this process, and then to see it thankfully come to an end with a championship. I think she went, wow, I want to be a part of something like that. It's very specific to her. It doesn't answer the questions for a lot of people probably listening, but it does if you pay attention to the genesis of it, which is the non-negotiables become extremely specific to you. And guess what? They're your non-negotiables. They're not wrong. They're not wrong.
Right.
They're your non-negotiables. Now, if it's just play D1, can I walk you through what that looks like? Because I do it. I want to play D1. Okay, awesome. Nothing wrong with D1. A lot of really good schools out there, a lot of really good programs. What about D1 do you want? Anything. Any D1, doesn't matter. Okay, you're going to win. I'll send you to one where you're going to win 3 games a year. So in 4 years, you're going to win 12 matches. Ooh. No. Oh, no. Okay. So D1, but win. Right? Oh, yeah. So you see what I'm saying? You walk through that. And you can start to shape the non-negotiable to a space that's maybe going to hopefully steer that player down a road of an incredible experience.
Well, the biggest thing you said there was only you know your non-negotiables. Yeah. Mine are different than Scott's and are different than Kevin's. It's just the way life is. And if you answer those questions honestly, you write them down, answer those questions, put down your answers down on paper, you just narrowed your search to like 20 schools in a half an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a daunting process. If you're like, oh, I'll just open my search up from Alaska to Southern Florida, like let's just get the whole spectrum going. You're in for it. But as soon as you narrow, as soon as you answer those questions, I mean, the big ones, distance from home. I mean, I like to put a little note on that. Most parents, as soon as you move out, they're like, all right, I'll see them at a game. Like they're not knocking on your door. I've had kids that are local come to school here. I get why a local kid wouldn't want to. Don't get me wrong. But they go an hour away from home. The hour and 5 hours might as well be the same amount. I mean, the parents aren't knocking on your doors. You're in a new town. Yeah. You are in a new place with new surroundings, and you can get that an hour away or even a half an hour away. So, I mean, Scott, Augie went to school in his backyard, and he still had a much different experience. It wasn't like he was living at home anymore. So, get your non-negotiable questions down. If you need help with those non-negotiables, there's plenty of places that can help you with that. This place is one of them. Write down all your answers there. That'll narrow your search dramatically. And only that's the best note that you could possibly give there. And only the answers, and they're not wrong. They're not wrong. And then you're going to find yourself happy with your investment at the end, because the biggest word that you just said there is experience. And when you leave and you graduate, and like I said, I just went to a wedding the other day, and there were 12, 15 alums there. And actually the guy married a women's soccer alum. So there's probably like 20 something total alums there. And they were all just so happy to be together, and they loved being around each other. And it was like being in college all over again. And do you know what they didn't talk about? They didn't talk about the soccer.
Exactly.
At all. The two very successful programs, very successful kids that were getting married, and they didn't talk about the soccer. Like I said, the guy that was on the bench for a lot of his career was one of the stars of the show. I mean, he had an amazing experience and would do it all over again. Even though he knew he wasn't going to play, he still would have come to here. And so it's just ask yourself those questions. You don't want to be regretting anything when you're 30, 40 years old, still paying off school, and you're wondering why you're paying off something that you didn't enjoy. That's one of the worst feelings I can imagine.
Yep.
Yeah. No, it's spot on.
Sure. Yeah. It's kind of about moments too, isn't it? Like I think about as a parent, seeing my kid with his buddies, right? And, before a match, they're kind of joking around a little bit, but they're still getting ready for the match. And then, after the match, they're hugging the guys that they grew up playing with, even if they're on the other team. And, just kind of that camaraderie. And then, I've had the good fortune of hanging out with him and a couple of his buddies, and those guys are tight. And that's like, and they're lifelong friendships that those guys have now. And, looking at it from the outside, it's all I could ever wish for my son was to have those kinds of relationships coming out of. I mean, he wasn't ever going to be a pro soccer player, so that's the valuable thing, other than his education, that he's going to take away from this. And it sounds like you guys are addressing that with the leadership program, with just the development. I know Chez's program pretty well. I mean, the culture that you guys have both developed within your programs is, that's stuff those guys are going to take forever away from what you guys are giving them. So it's really cool.
Yeah.
Damn it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, yeah. Chez, you got anything else? We're coming up on an hour. I try to keep these things to an hour if we can.
No, that was awesome. Kevin, I think you're right. I think that we're just peeling the opening layer for a lot of these conversations, and I'd love to have you back, and maybe we take one of them and just do an hour on one specific conversation. And I'd totally be up for it. So you let us know when you're ready to come back, and let's pick one topic and just dig into it some more. I would be ecstatic to do it.
Yeah, I think especially I understand the East Coast being really, really shallow in NAIA schools, right? So just even walking through specifically, what does that, because it's going to take a kid having to go a decent ways from home. So that's going to immediately, like you said, it's going to take the pool down. But I think understanding just all of the various opportunities that exist in college soccer. And I use the word opportunities instead of levels. Yeah. Right? I'm trying to stop saying levels, because levels just infers that there's a top and there's a bottom. Mm-hmm. It's experiences, it's organizations. Even trying to explain the difference between NAIA and NCAA, the way I have learned to say it is that they're both organizations that are promoting collegiate sports. That's all it is. And a school says, so all NAIs are small? No, they're not. There's some big NAIs, right? Now, are they Ohio State big? No chance, right? But it's not size-based, right? Just like D1 isn't, right? You've got some D1 schools that are running south of 4,000 students. Well, you've also got D1 schools running north of 70,000, right? So I think it's the education that opens up the opportunities for kids to understand how much is actually out there. And every place in the country is surrounded just a bit different. JUCO soccer out here is absolutely unreal. And there's a ton of it, and it's good. Really, really good.
Oh, yeah.
In other places, JUCO is almost non-existent, or it's an even non-scholarship, right? Out in Cali, or out in the Northwest, there's a ton of JUCOs up there that are non-scholarship.
Yeah,
doesn't mean they're, that's the misnomer of D3 that, I was very thankful. I love the fact that I started as a D3 coach, and would love to have continued, just had a different opportunity open up. In my time, it was back in the late 90s, I played Trinity University multiple times. Trinity could play with anybody in the country. Mm-hmm. Anybody. I don't care. You roll the ball out with that group of guys.
You played against them. Yeah. Paul had them humming back then.
Oh, bro.
They're still good, but back then. Oof.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely insane. Yeah. And then the messiahs of the days, right? Mm-hmm. And then, and then you go into D2 and you look at, Lynn back in the day, and where, Franklin Pierce is now, and University of Pueblo in the mountains of Colorado, right? And then NAI, you've got, a plethora, mostly Midwest based, kind of Midwest and South is kind of where it's migrated to. The West Coast has depleted quite a bit. Quite a few of those schools went to D2 just for essentially corporate reasons. So yeah, anytime you guys, here's what I'd say. I love what you guys are doing. You're trying to educate through this medium, and it's powerful. And I think you'll never know it, but you're you're helping change a lot of people's lives by providing good, solid information that I hope you hear from those people. But just know that what you guys are doing is not only needed, but it's incredibly valuable to the people who listen and actually pay attention to it and can gain a nugget here and there. Because that's all life is, man. It's a little tiny groups of nuggets.
Yeah, I've had a lot of kids in the recruiting process say, "Hey, I watched your podcast." I'm like, "Oh, that's so cool to me." You know, it's such a neat thing to hear.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, and I agree with you about what you're saying. You know, it's just sheer ignorance. That's all it is. I mean, I fall in that boat, you know, and it's so easy to hear like, oh, well, D1's better than 2 and 2's better than 3 just because of the number itself. And then NAIA and JUCO, oh, did you fail out? Like, it's just that's just where you end up to get out of there because you have to get your grades up, or you live in a weird part of, like, it's just ignorance. You know, at the end of the day, I mean, you know, speaking with you, I'm writing down notes. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm adding some stuff to the program. I've done that with a ton of different coaches so far. And yeah, I would love to talk to you about that stuff. And, you know, I think that there's a lot more avenues for kids. And yeah, I'm sure you run into that issue. You probably don't get too many Virginia kids reaching out to you, is my guess. Is that right?
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah,
we have a line that kind of runs from essentially kind of Ohio down, kind of almost straight down the country. And the number of emails we'll get east of that, and then typically Colorado west of that is, but you know what? That's not specific. I mean,
sure.
You're not getting too many, you know, Kansas City kids reaching out, right? St. Louis kids, Denver kids. It's just, that's all normal. It's not negative, positive.
Sure.
It is what it is. But yeah, but the ignorance is a great word, because even when I get a East Coast kid who sends me his resume, I don't immediately look at that resume and understand exactly what that resume means, because I don't understand all of the whole club world there, the levels there. This is a massive country with a lot of people. In the Midwest, I get an email. Yeah, I know exactly what they're talking about.
Right.
I've been here 21 years, so I better know it.
Yeah.
It changes, but so again, it's just this is why these mediums and these informational projects are so important, because ignorance is simply the lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
And so every single 1 hour you listen to something like this, you're less ignorant at the end. And that's a positive.
That's the point. That's right.
Yeah.
Cheese won't be, and he'll still be ignorant, but you know.
I just don't retain information. Well, it is. Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate it. Looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, thanks a ton, Kevin. I appreciate you jumping on. Let's definitely catch up over the summer sometime.
Yeah, perfect. Appreciate you guys. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Buddy.
Have a good one.
He was great.
He's fantastic, man. Says I'm still.
Yeah, it does say that.